Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Amy Cohn. I am a registered dietitian and currently serve as the Nutrition and External Affairs Senior Manager for the Cereal Operating Unit at General Mills. Now, Cheerios is just one brand that General Mills makes, but arguably might be one of the best well known brands, as well as the best beloved brand in America. The Cheerios brand is very proud to sponsor this virtual education series. I am joined today by the distinguished Dr. Penny Kris-Etherton. Dr. Penny Kris-Etherton is Evan Pugh University Professor of Nutritional Sciences and Distinguished Professor of Nutrition in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at Pennsylvania State University. She is past chair of the AHA Council on Lifestyle and Cardiometabolic Health and past chair of the AHA Nutrition Committee. Dr. Kris-Etherton is a fellow of the American Heart Association, the National Lipid Association, where she served as president, and the American Society for Nutrition. She has published over 400 papers in peer-reviewed literature and has received numerous awards for her accomplishments and contributions to the profession. Today, she will be talking about prevention in U.S. nutrition. Okay, and if you have any questions at all for us during the presentation, please submit them through the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen. But before we get started, I believe we have one brief polling question on the screen. Oh, here it comes for our audience. So for LDL cholesterol lowering, your patient should aim for a dietary pattern that achieves what percentage of calories from saturated fat? I am hoping people answered that. I don't see it on my screen, but maybe others are. Maybe we'll find out what the results were later. So I will just hand it now over to Penny to begin her presentation.
I
Take it
can't
away,
hear
Penny.
anything. Honey, can you come here for a minute? I cannot hear. Terry? Terry? And then I can move my slides, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, it's a pleasure
And then I can move my slides, right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here today. I have a little bit of a backdrop that I'm hearing, but I'll just go ahead. So today I'm going to.
And then I can move my slides.
Well,
right? Yeah.
as I talk now,
It's a pleasure
then
to be here today. I have a little bit of a backdrop that I'm hearing, but so I'm going to.
Well, there's a problem.
As I talk now.
Yamina, can you call me, please? Okay, it's a pleasure to be here today, everybody. So I'm going to talk about nutrition for the prevention of cardiovascular disease in the United States. And specifically, we're going to look at the evidence for the benefits of food-based recommendations for borderline risk patients. Okay, the next slide shows my disclosures. And the next slide shows the topics that I'm going to be discussing. So very briefly, I'll go over the global burden of disease, what the leading risk factors are for these chronic diseases, and then focus on dietary risk factors for cardiovascular disease. The emphasis of my talk is on how small changes in diet can have big effects on CVD risk. And then we'll look at diet effects on LDL and triglycerides and specific dietary recommendations for lipid lowering. And then I want to discuss some other strategies that clinicians can implement to optimize lipid lowering therapies for their patients in practice, like referring their patients to a registered dietitian nutritionist, promoting small behavior changes, and reinforcing messages at each visit. And we'll sum it up. So you can see on this slide, leading causes of mortality in rank order in the United States, both in 2007 and 2017. And it's notable that the first 7 haven't changed in the past 10 years. And all of these are non-communicable diseases. The next slide shows the leading causes of death for males and females in the United States in 2017. And what we see is that cardiovascular disease and cancer are the leading causes. In 2017, there were about 860,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease and about 600,000 deaths from cancer, resulting in a total of about 1.5 million deaths from cardiovascular disease and cancer. Okay, looking at risk factors for major causes of mortality in the United States, what we see is that poor diet quality is at the top of the list. And you can see that the medium blue color represents cardiovascular disease. So, a lot of people are dying from cardiovascular disease because of a poor diet. And then we see a number of other factors related to poor lifestyle practices like tobacco use and other risk factors that are related to our lifestyle practices like high blood pressure, high body mass index, high plasma glucose, high total cholesterol, and low physical activity. So boy, there's a lot that we can do with healthy lifestyle behaviors to decrease the risk of these leading causes of death in the United States. This slide shows risk factors for mortality in the order that they affect mortality, both in 2007 and 2017. And what we see is diet is number 1, and it hasn't changed at all from 2007 to 2017. Now, the purple bars represent behavioral risks, and so you see tobacco use and low physical activity in that category. But in terms of the orange bars, you see metabolic risks, and these truly are related to poor lifestyle practices like high blood pressure, high glucose levels, high body mass index, high LDL cholesterol. So again, a lot we can do with healthy lifestyle practices and diet in particular. Well, drilling down, looking at specific dietary factors, this slide shows that a diet high in sodium is number 1 for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and other causes collectively. You can see it accounts for over 220,000 deaths due to cardiovascular disease. But look at some of the other dietary risk factors. We consume a diet low in whole grains, low in fruits, low in nuts and seeds, low in vegetables, low in seafood, omega-3 fatty acids, low in fiber, lower polyunsaturated fats, low in legumes, and high in trans fats. Luckily, trans fats is no longer on the generally recognized as safe list, so it's really been removed from our food supply. The American diet is pretty bad. And this slide shows the diet quality overall of the average American. It's 59 out of a total of 100 points. That is pretty bad. And you can see on the right-hand side of this slide that there are differences in different age groups, so that younger people and older adults have a little better diet quality, but still, overall diet quality is really bad. And we need to do something about it. Boy, if we could do something about this, we could decrease risks of cardiovascular disease and other chronic diseases that are really taking their toll, not only in the United States, but worldwide as well. So you can see on this slide here that the U.S. diet falls way short of meeting current dietary recommendations. And this slide shows where we're falling short. So if you look at 0 here on the left-hand side, you see percent of population below the recommendation or the limit. And on the right-hand side, percent of the population above the recommendation or the limit. And so that the orange bar shows the intake below recommendations, and the blue bar shows the intake at or above the recommendations. And so focus on the orange bars. It shows where we really need to make improvements. You can see that our diet is real low in vegetables and fruits. In terms of grains, there are some people who are consuming recommended amounts. Where we fall way short is not getting enough whole grains. Dairy products are short of what recommendations are. Protein foods, there are some people who are meeting the recommendations, although where we fall short is we're not eating lean protein foods. We fall short in meeting the recommendations for oils, and we're eating way, way, way too much added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. So let's look at, if we made dietary changes, how would that affect risk of cardiovascular disease? So the Global Burden of Disease study basically showed that, boy, if we could improve our diet, we could really decrease global deaths very, very significantly. And so if you look at this here, high intake of sodium accounts for 3 million deaths annually. Low intake of whole grains, 3 million deaths annually, and low intake of fruits, 2 million deaths annually. Now, if we combine all three of these and achieve current recommendations, we could decrease just mortality by 50% worldwide. I just find that truly amazing, just those three foods. Now, that does mean going from what people are currently eating to achieving current dietary recommendations. So that's a big jump for a lot of people. So let's look at what small changes can do in terms of reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. Here's a study that just came out from the Harvard investigators looking at women in Nurses' Health Study 1 and 2, and then men in the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, for a total of 200,000 participants. And what they did was they looked at associations of dietary scores for 4 different eating patterns and risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, they used 4 different assessment methods, and these are all very different. They assign different numbers of points, but they're common in that they give positive points for good foods, positive nutrients, and then they take away points for nutrients and foods that we should be limiting, like saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. And here's what they found. Okay, there's a lot on this slide. Go to the far right, and that's the pooled analysis of, the Nurses' Health 1, 2, and Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. On the far left, we see the risk reduction for a 25 percentile increment in dietary score. You don't have to go from what's really bad to what's currently recommended. That's a huge step for a lot of patients, but small changes can really benefit cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, and stroke by about 10 to 20%. That small changes really do make an impact. And then looking at this in terms of specific foods, this is really interesting. Basically, Mozaffarian and Capwell looked at targeted dietary changes and found that just 8 dietary changes, and these are small changes, can reduce cardiovascular mortality by over 50% in the United States and globally. And what are they? Look at the individual ones. Just increasing fruits by 1 serving a day can decrease cardiovascular mortality by 8%. Increasing vegetables 1 serving a day, decrease mortality 7%. Increase whole grains 1 serving a day, decrease mortality 10%. Nuts 2 servings a week, decrease by 11%. Increase vegetable oils 1.5 servings a day, 5% reduction mortality. Increase seafood omega-3 fatty acids 50 milligrams a day, 5% reduction. Reduce sodium 800 milligrams per day, and that's a 6% reduction in total mortality. So I think that this is really a good message for your patients. Can you get them to just eat 1 additional serving of fruit a day? Can you get them to just switch from a refined grain to a whole grain? That in and of itself can have a big impact. So now let's look at the National Lipid Association recommendations and those of AHA as well for lipid lowering. Okay, the latest cholesterol guidelines came out in 2019. And what does it recommend in terms of diet? Well, a healthy dietary pattern. And this emphasizes intakes of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, healthy protein sources, low-fat dairy products, low-fat poultry without skin, fish, seafood, and nuts, non-tropical vegetable oil, and limits intakes of sweets, sugar-sweetened beverages, and red meats. Now, this particular diet pattern should be individualized for appropriate calorie requirements, personal and cultural food preferences, and whether or not somebody needs additional medical nutrition therapy. So good adherence to various cholesterol-lowering diets. There's not just one, but there are a number of different dietary patterns that meet these guidelines, can lower LDL cholesterol levels 10 to 15%. The 2013 HAACC guideline on lifestyle management recommended a similar healthy dietary pattern, but also 5 to 6% of calories from saturated fat. And the National Lipid Association made these recommendations in 2015, and then you can see the expected LDL lowering response with them, decreasing saturated fat to less than 7% of calories and less than 200 milligrams of dietary cholesterol. LDL will decrease 5 to 10%. Weight loss, for a 3 to 5% weight loss, there'll be 3 to 5% reduction for a 5% weight loss. Plant sterols and stanols around 2 grams a day, plus viscous fiber 5 to 10 grams a day, a 4 to 10% reduction. And in total, this is a very realistic estimate, a 12 to 25% reduction in LDL with all of these changes. Now, if you look at the last bullet point here, a reduction of 15% by combining these dietary interventions could potentially reduce coronary heart disease risk a lot by 2 or 3-fold. So, I think the key thing here is that, it'd be great to get a patient to make all these changes, but even some of them, achieve benefits. For triglyceride lowering, we know that weight loss, 5 to 10% weight loss, can lower triglycerides 20%. Implementing a Mediterranean or moderate fat diet versus a low fat diet can lower triglycerides 10 to 15%. Per gram of long chain omega-3 fatty acids, triglycerides are expected to be lowered by 5 to 10%. And then for every 1% energy replacement of dietary carbohydrates with unsaturated fat, you can get a 1 to 2% triglyceride lower response. So the average American consumes a diet that has 50% calories from carbs, just going down to 40%, which is very realistic, can lower triglycerides about 10%. From the National Lipid Association's recommendation, we see specific recommendations for our patients who have borderline high triglycerides, higher, and very high triglycerides with chylomicronemia that place them at risk for pancreatitis. And what we see here is common recommendations for all: weight loss, 5 to 10% will benefit them all. Added sugars are variable. For those who have very high triglycerides, they really shouldn't have any added sugars, but they should be limited for anybody who has high triglycerides. In terms of total fat, here's where we see big differences. People who have moderately high triglycerides should be on a moderate fat diet, whereas those who have very high triglycerides have to be on a very low fat diet. And you can see specific recommendations for EPA and DHA, and different recommendations for alcohol as well. So recommending your patients, referring your patients to a registered dietitian is so helpful in helping them achieve greater reductions, both in LDL cholesterol and triglycerides. And here are two graphs from Gita Saikin's meta-analysis showing that when patients are referred to a registered dietitian, you can see here that there's a greater LDL cholesterol reduction, 10.2 milligrams per deciliter, compared to when they're not, when they're kind of on their own. And you can see the benefits of referring your patient to a registered dietitian nutritionist on triglycerides, and that's about 16 milligram per deciliter, greater decrease than when they're pretty much on their own. So what else can you recommend for your patient? Well, the American Psychological Association has 5 tips for positive behavior change. And you can see the ones that I've squared are: start small, change one behavior at a time. My focus is nutrition. So think about those small changes that you can tell your patient to implement. Eat a piece of fruit, switch to whole grains, have a salad for dinner at night. And then there are others as well. Okay, and so I just had to put this slide in because the UK has an amazing program. It's called Making Every Content Count. And what they're telling clinicians to do is reinforce healthy diet messages and follow up on previous shared decision-making goals for achieving a healthy diet, for achieving other lifestyle recommendations like physical activity, stopping smoking, at every patient visit. Physicians really do, patients really do listen to physicians. And so given that, I think there's a lot that clinicians can do. So in conclusion, overall diet quality in the United States is pretty bad. We really have to make a lot of changes to meet current food-based and nutrient-based recommendations. But I think I've shown you that small changes in diet quality can yield big benefits. For lipid lowering, following current dietary recommendations can have a very significant impact. And not only that, you can do other things like referring your patient to a registered dietitian nutritionist to optimize the effects of diet and help them adhere to current recommendations. Make every patient visit count. Here are some resources. National Lipid Association has great patient tear sheets, and Amina has put a handout for you online that you can access. It's a tear sheet for making good choices on a budget. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Penny. That was a great presentation. Super important information. So for those of you who may not be familiar with General Mills, I just first wanted to start off with sharing what our purpose and our guidepost is, which is to make food the world loves. And we make a lot of different brands that we sell all across the globe, including the very beloved Cheerios. Cheerios is very honored to be a sponsor of today's conference and to be in the presence of esteemed professionals like yourselves who are dedicated every single day to helping Americans manage their heart health and hopefully, ultimately, live a fuller, healthier life. And I can tell you this, although we are not medical professionals at Cheerios, we do share the same goal in helping Americans live a healthier, happier life. We just happen to do it one breakfast bowl at a time. Now, Cheerios originally debuted in 1941 as Cheery Oats, if you didn't know that. It was the first ready to eat cereal ever that was made of oats. And today, Cheery Oats still thrives as Cheerios with a distinguishing and critically important functional benefit. As part of a heart healthy diet, Cheerios can help lower cholesterol. Now, as Penny just shared, and as all of you very, very well know, heart disease has and continues to be the number one cause of death for all Americans. And high cholesterol is one of the leading risk factors for developing heart disease. These unfortunate facts have inspired us at Cheerios to make our mission as bold and as ambitious as possible. Thus, our purpose at Cheerios is to change the trajectory of heart health in America by empowering happy and healthy hearts. But how do we do this at Cheerios? How do we even begin to make an impact? Well, we first have to start off with the product. So we have to make sure that we make the very best product possible. So our Cheerios product is made with whole grain oats, which do contain beta glucan, a soluble fiber that helps remove cholesterol from the body. All Cheerios contain 12 vitamins and minerals, are low fat, are a good source of fiber, and are gluten free. Then we partner with credible organizations like the American Heart Association and MyFitnessPal, who are equally committed to helping improve America's heart health. We do believe that when we partner with these organizations, we are better together, working together to help Americans choose and adopt healthier lifestyles, like eating more whole grain oats that contain beta glucan, or by providing a free 3-month membership to MyFitnessPal to motivate movement and mindfulness when eating, to help people live a healthier, happier life. And then we do educate at Cheerios in an engaging manner that resonates and, dare I say, entertains Americans on heart healthy eating and heart healthy activities. So this includes short videos that are fun but informational. This also includes like bright, vibrant infographics on Pinterest. We know that aging adults, believe it or not, are a dominant user on Pinterest. So at Cheerios, we work really hard to meet these consumers where they are at with bite-sized, digestible, and doable education on living a heart healthy lifestyle. And we just think you can have a little fun with heart health, and who better to help us on this positive, fun, and approachable journey than Buzz the Bee himself. And then, if this wasn't enough, we actually went as far as changing the iconic shape of the Cheerio to a heart. We did this for a limited time only, just this past February, to honor American Heart Month and to more overtly communicate and educate in a positive, fun way that Cheerios can help lower cholesterol. Now, last but certainly not least, it is and often one of the most overlooked things, but very incredibly important, especially now, is that Cheerios is affordable and accessible to nearly every single American. So, on average, a bowl of Cheerios with milk just costs about 50 cents per serving. And although it's low in cost, it is rich in nutrients. And so, we know that nutrition isn't nutritious if people can't afford it. And the good news is that Cheerios is affordable and nutritious and delicious. I'm going to cut this short because I see we're really close on time, but I do have some really fun cereal facts. If you didn't know, it is the number one source of a lot of good nutrition for the majority of Americans. So that's always good to know. And Cheerios delivers on all of that. We are so thankful to be here today with all of you. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I think we have maybe 30 seconds for one question. So I will go to the Q&A. Let's see. Penny, if you're still with me, can you please comment on eggs and chicken? It looks like this is a question.
On eggs and chicken?
is what I have in the Q&A here, if I'm looking at the right thing.
It's AIDS?
No, eggs, EGGS,
Oh,
eggs,
eggs.
eggs and chicken.
Eggs and chicken. Okay. Well, eggs are a source of dietary cholesterol. And we do know that dietary cholesterol does increase LDL cholesterol, and some patients are more sensitive than others. But I think in general, if people follow current dietary recommendations and eat a diet low in saturated fat, then for most people, they'll eat a diet that is also low in dietary cholesterol. In terms of chicken, it's a white meat, and so it's a lean protein food, and so something that you can include in your diet within current recommendations.
Great. Well, I think that's the only question we have time for. I thank everyone for their time today. Thank you again, Penny, very, very much.